Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball. It's another solo episode today because I'm going to be going over in detail the most anticipated categories of the Oscar race. Yes, you got that right. I'm going to be talking about all of the short films. Now, this is my gift to you. This is a guide of the short films. I have spent the last month, ever since those shortlists were released, I've spent all that time tracking down all 45 of these movies, watching them, forming thoughts, and I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a description of each film, tell you their strengths, their weaknesses, and hopefully help you to make a more informed decision when predicting the shorts for the Oscars. Now, this is going to be a very long video, so I hope that while you're here, you can drop a like, drop a subscription. We're releasing Oscar content all year long, not just in the lead up to the Oscars. So without further ado though, let's get into it. You might be able to tell the first category we're going to talk about here is the animated short category. I will go through them in the order of my personal predictions from bottom to top. So the first film to talk about is Boom. This is my number 15 in terms of where I believe it's going to end up. Boom is a computer animated short film about two birds who are fighting to run away from a volcano and are trying to carry their eggs and just get away safe, but the two birds start fighting each other, and it's kind of a silly little short film. It's reminiscent of those old Pixar shorts that would play in front of the movies. If I'm not mistaken, it is a graduate piece. I don't know what university at. Look, it's nothing substantial. It's cute. It's kind of charming, but it's small, and there are films that have a more clear artistic expression in the category. And I think there are also films that are just kind of wacky and fun here too that are also a little bit better than Boom. When you have a film that's sort of unsubstantial and wacky like this, it's not really as strong as some of the other ones that you'd typically see nominated. So Boom is my least likely contender. Then at number 14, we have Smoke, otherwise known as Humo. Humo is a Spanish film. It is a Holocaust film. It tells the story of a child and their family who are taken off by trains and taken to a concentration camp. The thing about Humo is it is nothing special. You know, we've seen this story done a million times. We've seen it done better, honestly. It's just not really adding anything new. Not that every single film has to add something new, but I can't picture really anyone watching this and being like, oh, this is definitive. This is one of the better films about this topic. It's such a saturated topic to make films about, and I do feel like you kind of need to bring perspective at this point if you're going to make one. Otherwise, it just feels like you're cashing in. Now at 13, I have Eva, which I am absolutely shocked is actually in the top 5 on Gold Derby. Eva is an Estonian film, and it has this very cool animation style. Perhaps that's why it's a little bit higher. The animation style has this sort of 1920s sheen over it. It reminds me actually a lot of Cuphead, not in the actual animation style, but in the way some of the characters move, the artificial film texture over it, kind of mimicking the look of old cartoons, although this one is specifically mimicking Eastern European cartoons. And it becomes a bit of a wild, surreal journey. One thing about this list, there are a lot of wild, surreal journeys, and I really don't think we're gonna see any of them be nominated. There's some that are maybe a little bit closer to the nomination, but Eva is the coldest of the experimental animated films. It didn't leave much of an impression on me. It's just kind of surrealism and then it's done. It's very well animated, one of my favorite looking short animated films, but not one that I'm like, yeah, this is coming for the nomination. Hang on, I'm gonna take my glasses off. The next film that I'm going to talk about here, my number 12 pick in the category, Wild Summon. Wild Summon, I think, could either be a very strong contender for a nomination or it's just nothing at all. It is a nature documentary style film about salmon making their voyage, except instead of seeing salmon, instead we see these weird CGI atrocities that are human being, like little miniature human beings in scuba suits with flippers, but they're being gutted like fish and tossed around like fish. It's clearly an environmental message meant to promote understanding and empathy towards all creatures, especially, the fish that it's talking about here. But it just feels like a bit of a purposeless tech demo. I see the point, but I think it's kind of a dumb point. It looked quite unappealing. It was strange, and it didn't add anything other than creepy little human beings. This one wasn't for me, but it could potentially, I could be wrong. This could be a higher pick, but I just think everything else above it is stronger at this moment. The next one is Dog Apartment. Gold Derby actually has it as their least likely on the list. It is number 15 out of 15 on Gold Derby. Dog Apartment is one of the only stop motion films on the list this year. It follows a man who lives in an apartment, and the apartment is a dog. Very strange. He has to feed the hungry dog in the morning through the sink of the apartment, and he lives inside the apartment, but he plays with the dog, and the couch is the dog's fur. It's very weird. I told you there's a lot of surreal, strange movies on the list this year, and this is definitely one of them. There were moments where I kind of lost track of what was happening, but it was cool overall. It was a very well done film. The stop motion was gorgeous to look at. Always a big fan of stop motion when we get a good stop motion film, but ultimately this one, it's not gonna make a huge mark on me because I couldn't figure out what the themes were. I couldn't decipher it. It was really just, a man wakes up, he takes care of his dog apartment, he leaves, he gets some stuff from the town, he comes back home, he cares for the dog apartment again, and that's the film. There's not much more to it. And then at number 10, I've got Pete. Now Pete is currently ranked the number 3 contender on Gold Derby. There is a tendency on the Gold Derby base, because it skews younger, it skews more Gen Z, it skews very progressive, I would say, which is a good thing for sure. But anytime there is a short film that sort of talks about LGBTQ themes, I think it gets a little over-predicted on Gold Derby. The best example of this is a few years ago, there was a film called In a Heartbeat, which made the animated shortlist, and it was so highly predicted all over the place. I think it was probably number 1, number 2 on Gold Derby. People were just so enthusiastic about this because, it's an animated film and it's specifically talking about children who are LGBTQ, which is awesome. But the fact of the matter is the film wasn't that strong on its own merits. People were really predicting it mostly because of the themes being important, the themes really connecting with the people who are predicting on Gold Derby. And so it got boosted very high up in the rankings without actually having the real reason to be. And Pete is exactly the same this year. Pete is a short film about a non-binary kid named Pete, and Pete wants to play on the baseball team. Pete doesn't understand why no one will let them play on the team. And then they play on the team, and then the parents make fun of Pete, and then Pete's mom stands up for them, and it's a sweet story, but it's just, I'm going to be completely honest, I do feel bad about this. I just think that this film is maybe a little bit cliche in the way it is approached. I feel bad saying that because this is based on someone's real life. I just think that some of the ways that they hit emotional beats in the film, it doesn't feel authentic. It feels like they're really gunning for your emotions. They're really gunning for those familiar beats we've seen many, many times before. I just feel like it's quite cliche, and I really think it's being over-predicted simply because those themes are so important. And I do feel really terrible saying that because, there's a lot of heart in this film. That's very evident. But at number 9, I have another film I'm not really much of a fan of. This is 27. 27 was the Cannes Short Film Palme d'Or winner this year. Very notable because I don't think they often give that award to animated films. 27 is another surreal, wild adventure of a film. It follows the main character, who is 27 years old, and because she can't afford rent, she's moved back in with her parents, and it sort of follows her aimless state of being at this time in her life. She can't afford property, she can't get a real job, she's kind of just in a state of limbo, and it follows her specifically as she has a wild party night out and sort of has this psychedelic trip. As someone in my mid-20s and feeling a little aimless, a little all over the place, this should be speaking to me a lot more than it is, but I just found that it was, it kind of went for shock value at times. I think it was really thinking it had more to say than it really did. The animation style is cool. There are some interesting ideas, but I'm genuinely mystified as to why this won the Cannes Palme d'Or for short films. Apparently a lot of people love it. I'm not one of them. I just don't see this one climbing up the ranks into the top 5. And then there's Pachyderm at number 8. This is a little bit creepy. It's an interesting story. It follows a young girl who goes to visit her grandparents, and she tells the stories about how she saw the stuff that they'd hunted and had mounted on the walls, and she imagined fighting these creatures as monsters. And as the film goes on, we sort of get to learn that there's something more nefarious underneath this, and it's possible that this child who's narrating the story is being abused. It is a very dark film. It leaves a lot more questions than it answers, which is kind of why I'm not predicting it a little higher. Offers no simple solutions, no easy answers, and I think that this is a category where I do expect that voters will want something to be more spelled out for them. This film's strength is that it doesn't spell anything out, but it just also I think is going to hold it back from getting that nomination. Now, at number 7, I have the only film out of all 45 short films that I have not seen. This is I'm Hip. I'm Hip is directed by the famed Disney animator John Musker, who brought us some of the greatest Disney Renaissance films, and he is retired now and just decided, hey, I'm going to make a short film. I'm going to hand draw a little 4-minute movie about a cat dancing around and playing jazz music. Now, I haven't seen this one. I don't know what it consists of, but I know it's very light. It's a little silly, but it feels apparently like classic Disney. It's emulating that style that John Musker made his name in. And for that reason, it is pretty high up on my list, because, you know, maybe voters get nostalgic and want to revisit something that feels very at home for them, feels very safe. And I think John Musker, his style is very much that. I'm excited to see this one whenever it's made available. I would love for it to get a nomination so that I am able to watch it. At number 6, I have Letter to a Pig. Letter to a Pig is currently ranked number 2 on Gold Derby, and I can see why. Now, this is the last weird, surreal movie that I'm going to talk about here. Letter to a Pig is a story of a young girl who's in a class, and her teacher has brought in a Holocaust survivor to tell a story to the class. He was hiding from the Nazis, and he hid in a pig pen, and they helped to hide him. So he has written this letter thanking the pig for saving his life. After he finishes reading the letter, the little girl in the classroom has a dream where she sees herself in this strange liminal state with a bunch of pigs and soldiers and it's weird, but it definitely resonates. They have a very cool style of animation where it kind of blends collage and black and white photography. They're mostly sketched in black and white, but then every once in a while you'll see like one of their body parts becomes real. So it's a very cool looking film. I can see why it's top 5 on Gold Derby. I personally wouldn't put it up there. I think everything from here on is a little bit stronger, in my opinion. Now, into my top 5. These are the films that I think are going to be nominated. They are not necessarily my favorites. Starting off at number 5, I actually have Our Uniform, which is currently ranked number 14 out of 15 on Gold Derby with 100-1 odds. I have no idea why this has 100-1 odds. Usually in the animated short film category, we get 1 or 2 shorts every year that has a really groundbreaking experimental style of animation. What Our Uniform does, the entire film is like a formal experiment. It is a personal essay written by a bunch of different Iranian women speaking about their experience as little girls going to school and being forced to wear a mandatory uniform. It's a film that talks about clothing as individuality and specifically looking at that through the lens of this ongoing struggle that is happening in Iran. And the thing that our uniform does so well here is the animation style embodies what the film is talking about. They are basically animating on fabric. So the fabric will move and the paint will change on the fabric. I've never seen anything quite like it. It's really interesting how they animated it. I've seen plenty of short films in the past that have been nominated that sort of similarly experiment formally. And that's why I'm really big on this one getting a nomination. I would highly recommend snag this one for the 100-to-1 odds, because if it gets in, which I really think it has a good shot, your odds will really pay off there. Now at number 4, I have War is Over, inspired by the music of John and Yoko. God, this film's awful. It's really bad. It's saccharine, cloying, just so the whole reason this is going to get nominated is the title. You know, you see the title, inspired by the music of John and Yoko, and I think some voters who maybe don't take the category as seriously will just be like, yeah, I have to pick 5, here you go. I'll pick the John Lennon one. This film was all created in Unreal Engine. It was sponsored by Epic Games, and it is a story set on a World War I battlefield about 2 soldiers across enemy lines who use a pigeon to play chess. They send their chess moves to each other, and in the different camps, they have their chess boards and they play a game against each other, and the war's raging on, and then, oh look, war is over, and we all get to celebrate the war being finished. It's so bad. This is one of my least favorite films in the category. Now, it does look quite pretty. I mean, it was made in Unreal Engine by Weta Digital. I really think it's getting a nomination, and Gold Derby does too. It's currently ranked number 4 on Gold Derby and number 4 in my own odds, so hey, that's pretty good. Now, at number 3, I have A Kind of Testament, one of the darkest films on the list. It's a documentary-style film that tells the story of a woman who finds an animation of herself online. Upon further exploration, she realizes that this is an entire website filled with photos that she's taken that someone has painted and animated. And she becomes very curious about why someone found photos off of her social media page and decided to draw them and animate them in what looks like hundreds of hours worth of work. It becomes a story about obsession and a story about hesitation and a story about feeling comfortable with the decisions that you've made in life. It's very reminiscent of the work of Satoshi Kon, who did Paprika, who did Perfect Blue, who did basically Darren Aronofsky's entire career. It's a very cool film, and one that I think if voters watch this, it'll stick in their minds for a very long time. In that way, I think it's a pretty easy one for me to predict for a nomination, because I can't see voters watching this and shaking it off too quickly. This feels like the most grown-up nomination we're going to get in the bunch. Number 2, 95 Senses, currently ranked number 6 on Gold Derby, and let me tell you, this should be higher. When I watched 95 Senses, I had to watch it again immediately, and then I showed it to my partner because I was like, wow, that film blew me away. I just had to keep watching it, and it had me crying. It left a mark on me. Now, I love the animated short category. This is my favorite category year in, year out. And the reason that I love this category so much is it gives animators such an opportunity to explore. Animated shorts, they are low stakes. You are not making a film designed for a mass audience. You can experiment with your own style. You can try different things that animators can't do in feature films. The reason why we see so many computer animated feature films is because they're marketable. When you think of a feature film, it is a mass media. You need, especially animation, you need to be able to sell that to a crowd. And people have figured out computer animation, it sells. The type of animation you see in the animated short category is always unique. It's different. You know, like I mentioned with our uniform, it's painted onto clothing. You would never see that in a feature film. And 95 Senses really embodies this as a film. This one is directed by Jared and Jerusha Hess, best known for the films Napoleon Dynamite and Nacho Libre. They are here directing this film, and what they did is they hired 6 animation teams to create unique segments in a film about the senses. We have one story about a narrator, an old man telling his life story, and then we have a different animation style for each of his senses. So 6 different animators using their own completely different style. You would never see something like this in a feature film, and that's why I love this category. It is so fresh, so different. I won't spoil the twist here because I think you should all go and watch this film. It's a beautiful movie, and if anything beats the number 1, it would be 95 Senses. So at number 1, I have Once Upon a Studio, the Disney 100 animated film. This is the one that everyone's seen. It's the one on Disney+. It's a nostalgia trip that's a commercial for Disney Studios, but it's actually good. The characters in Disney's animation studios emerge from paintings on the walls, and they gather together to get a group photo celebrating 100 years of Walt Disney animation. One Letterboxd review that I read said it best. It is much less a film that says, hey, look at all these things we own, and much more of a film that says, hey, look at all these things that we made. It's a reminder of why Disney has had such an impact on pop culture, why Disney has had such an impact on many people's lives. These characters, they feel alive in this film, and it's just so sweet to watch. Now, this one wouldn't be my favorite in the category. My favorite in the category is 95 Senses, but I am predicting Once Upon a Studio to win the award. It's honestly just a runaway win, especially because Disney is not getting nominated for Wish this year, their other Disney 100 celebration film. And I think that the consolation prize for, hey, Disney, you made a shit film this year, is saying, hey, but you also made a pretty good film. Here's an Oscar. So that is my top 15 for best animated short. I hope that I could shed some light on this category. But I think that means it's time to move. This is the best documentary short category. The first one to talk about here is Camp Courage, which I'm now seeing on Gold Derby is ranked number 6. I just can't imagine a justification of why this is so high up on Gold Derby. Actually, maybe it's just because it's Netflix, but there is no reason that this should have 16-1 odds. It is so forgettable and bland. It follows the story of 2 Ukrainian refugees, a mother and a daughter, who I believe they come to Switzerland. I think it's Switzerland. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but they're somewhere in a very mountainous region. The mother signs up her daughter for a mountain climbing program, and it's specifically mountain climbing for refugees, I believe. It's just about the strength of the human spirit and about having a childhood when you had to leave your childhood behind. Good messages, sweet messages, but it's so forgettable. It is a Netflix movie, and I believe it might be the only Netflix film in this category. Netflix doesn't need to get in. Last year, I think I predicted a film just based on it being Netflix for the top 5. I think it was called Camp Confidential, and Camp Confidential did not get a nomination, and I thought it would because of Netflix. So yeah, leave this one behind. The next film to talk about is The Barber of Little Rock. I have this ranked number 14. Gold Derby has it at number 4. I guess I get it. It has a good title. It has an important message. But here's the thing about The Barber of Little Rock. It feels like an advertisement. This film tells the story of the barber, and he, as a Black business owner, has realized how hard it is for many Black entrepreneurs to start businesses. Black people in general have traditionally, systemically been kept away from getting bank loans. So what he has done is created this collective that basically acts as a loan agency to help Black businesses get started and get on their feet. It's really cool what this guy is doing. But that said, it feels like an advertisement for his loaning agency at times. That definitely rubbed me a little bit the wrong way on this one. Then at number 13, I have Island in Between. It follows the story of a Taiwanese man. He grew up in Taiwan on a little island that is just off the coast of mainland China. It's kind of it's the island in between Taiwan and mainland China. It tells the story about the tensions between China and Taiwan and what that sort of historically has been. It's a fascinating subject, but to be honest, I just think that there are other more important, more relevant, more current films of the moment in this lineup, and that's why I have it at number 13. I think it's a very good film. It's just, is it the most pressing film here? And the answer is no. But a lot of the time with this category, you want to find the films that feel like they speak to the now. And this one really, I don't think, does. At number 12, there is Black Girls Play, The Story of Hand Games. This is an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary about what the title says. It's about hand games and clapping games and rhythm games, and specifically a lot of these games' origins. This film sort of theorizes how these games played by little girls growing up eventually led to the creation of hip-hop. Now, the problem with this documentary, it makes an interesting point. It has an interesting thesis statement, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of concrete evidence to back things up. It has no way of proving that except for like 2 songs where they sample hand games and interpolate hand games into them. It's like an essay without sources. And that's the big problem here. It's some pretty big assumptions that it's making, and I don't think it really backs it up. Then at number 11, we have my favorite film in the category. This is Bear. I just don't think the Oscars are ready for a film this cool yet. Bear is a student graduate film from Switzerland, which I'm absolutely blown away by the fact that this is someone's thesis film. If there's one film in this category that I think is legitimately pushing forward the medium of documentary, it's Bear. So the director of this film, her name's Morgan Freund, and Morgan Freund was a student at this university in Switzerland, and this man came to the university with a bunch of old DV tapes, and he said, I'm a nature photographer. I wonder if any of your students would want to turn my footage of bears into a film. And Morgan Freund was like, sure, I'll take a look at it. And she started looking through the tapes, and the tapes are mostly full of footage of bears in the wild. You know, his travels around the world, his travels to Canada, to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, to Alaska, to Russia. It's just him filming bears. But then she starts to find other things on the tapes. A lot of the tapes don't just film nature. There's also a lot of weird sort of peeping Tom footage of women on these tapes. Women who are on the bus not paying attention. He'll start zooming into them. He'll start looking at their breasts. He'll start looking at their legs, at their bodies. Instead of just ignoring it, Morgan Freund turns this into the film. She brings this man into the edits room with her, and she questions him. Why did you film this? And she explains to him her experience with patriarchy, her experience with being objectified by men, and it becomes this discussion not just of creepy man videotaping women, but it becomes a larger discussion about the history of art in the world and the male gaze in art. Why is it that male artists so often are the ones to paint women, to render women in art, and thus they are turned into objects to look at, to gaze at, to desire. It is a genuinely revolutionary film, groundbreaking stuff, but it's not getting a nomination, which breaks my heart because this should be in the conversation to win the category. It's an incredible film, and if you ever get a chance to see Bear, see it. I have a feeling Morgan Freund, if she can keep making films this good, I think she might be one of the greats in documentary 10, 20 years down the road. At number 10, I have How We Get Free. It's a political documentary about this woman who she has devoted her life to getting people out of jail. She's a prison abolitionist. She'll go from place to place. She'll bail people out who need it. And she has this fund set up where she can help people access bail who are not able to gather the funds to get out of prison. The film becomes a discussion about the importance of getting rid of bail and getting rid of this system in general, because it's a system that entirely benefits the wealthy and makes it so that the unwealthy, the working class, the poor people in America must stay in prison while the rich go free. As someone who definitely buys into a lot of the ideology here, it's preaching to the choir. You know, if you go into this film already believing in prison abolition, then it makes all the points that you want to hear. But if you go into this film skeptical, it's not going to change your mind. In fact, it might even make you less convinced in the argument. And that's definitely a problem. I think a lot of the time in these political documentaries, the thing that people don't realize is that sometimes what they're saying is really going to fall on deaf ears for the most part. I think that some voters in the Academy might struggle to get behind what this film is saying. At number 9, I have Between Earth and Sky. It's a very charming nature documentary biopic about a woman who loves trees. She loves trees. She spent most of her life studying trees. She climbs trees. She loves trees. And my goodness, I loved watching this woman loving trees. It's charming. It's sweet. And it has a vital environmental message. It's definitely a film that reverberates with passion. At number 8 on my list, I have Oasis. This is a Quebecois film. To be honest, if you put this on the live action short category and not documentary short, I would not question a thing. This film does not feel like a documentary. It tells the story of 2 brothers growing apart over the course of a summer. They're twin brothers, and they've always done everything together growing up. And now that they are hitting puberty, they are starting to become individual people. And the film sort of captures a moment in time. Is this the last summer when these kids are going to be the brothers that they've always been? It's not really a substantial film, but it is beautifully made. Stunning looking film. I don't know how they captured this stuff because it feels so intimate, so vulnerable. Now it is down all the way at the bottom of the Gold Derby list, and that kind of shocks me. That to me says that people have not watched this film because it is much stronger than number 15 on this list. At number 7, I have Wings of Dust. It's another environmental doc. Specifically is about indigenous people in South America. Specifically, I think it's in Chile that it's set. Indigenous Chileans who are trying to protect their rivers, trying to protect the waterways which are being polluted by big business. Wings of Dust is very well made. It's one of those movies where you're just sitting there thinking, yeah, I've seen this before, but wow, it's well done. Very well done. That's why I have it at number 7. Now we're getting into the real deal top 6. I would recommend very highly use this top 6 for your top 5. I feel very strongly that these 5 of these ones are going to be the ones that get in the end. Number 6 is Deciding Vote. It's archive footage and it's talking heads. And it's a political documentary specifically about the politician in New York State who was the last vote to make the decision to legalize abortion in the state of New York. He gave up his entire political career by voting against his district, by voting with his heart. It eventually, just 2 years later, led to the passing of Roe v. Wade. It's a powerful film. It's a story where I was sitting there the entire time thinking, how the hell have I not heard this before? On Letterboxd, I saw someone say it's like the best Aaron Sorkin movie that Aaron Sorkin never did. It's definitely a powerful film. It's not really revolutionary. But that said, last year we saw nominated The Martha Mitchell Effect, and The Martha Mitchell Effect was very similar in form to this one. So it's very possible this one gets in. I just think everything above is a little bit stronger. At number 5, I have Last Song from Kabul, which is the number 3 ranked film on Gold Derby. This is the story of an orchestra of young women in Afghanistan, and it specifically tells the story of their escape from Afghanistan on the horizon of the Taliban coming back into power and music becoming banned, essentially. It's a story about the power of artistic expression and the way that artistic expression can fight and even eventually, hopefully, topple a regime. It's a very well done film directed by Kevin MacDonald, who you may know as the director of The Mauritanian or Last King of Scotland or many other films. He's done a lot of stuff, and I don't think he's made many documentaries, but this one is very strong, and I think it's a very solid nominee. It's a powerful story. It's cutting and relevant, and it definitely has a lot to say about our current world. At number 4, Nai Nai and WIPO. This one is ranked number 7 on Gold Derby. I've said many times that you need to be relevant to get this nomination. Nai Nai and WIPO takes the other stance, which is that sometimes the documentary short films that we see are not the most cutting and relevant. In fact, sometimes they are completely apolitical. Nai Nai and WIPO is just about grandparents. The filmmaker Sean Wang, who actually has his debut narrative feature film premiering at Sundance this week. Nai Nai and WIPO are his grandparents, his 2 grandmas from different parents, but they live together now in their old age. They're in their late 80s, early 90s, and they are just the sweetest, cutest frickin' grandmas who fart a lot and laugh and dance. This is a story about youth and aging gracefully, and the way that family can bring joy to our lives and family can revitalize us. The big central question here is, are these elderly women just putting on a show for the camera? Are they putting on a show for their grandson? Do they just kind of become normal old women when their grandson's not around? Regardless, you'll watch this film and think, dear God, I wish that those were my grandparents. Nai Nai and WIPO, it's hard to not fall in love with this film. I can't see any voter walking away from this having no impression whatsoever. It's so sweet, so funny, and just a true joy in a category that's filled with films that are frankly pretty miserable. At number 3, I have If Dreams Were Lightning, Rural Healthcare Crisis. This is ranked number 11 on Gold Derby, which I'm pretty shocked by. It has 75-1 odds. Snatch those up right away. This film's directed by Raman Barani, who you might know as the filmmaker behind The White Tiger, Man Push Cart, 99 Homes. He's a pretty well-established narrative filmmaker, and I think this might be his first documentary film. If Dreams Were Lightning is a talking heads interview-style documentary about the rural healthcare crisis in America, specifically about how rural areas don't draw in enough profit for a privatized healthcare system to properly fund. So in rural areas, the few hospitals that exist are closing, and people who depend on these hospitals to survive, people with prior conditions, cannot access insurance, cannot access healthcare, and ultimately get sick and pass away because they do not have access to these resources. I'm a dual citizen of Canada and the United States. I was born in Canada. One thing I will never understand about the States and about the mindset in the States is how people have convinced themselves that they would rather pay thousands and thousands of dollars in crappy insurance and deductibles over waiting for a little bit in a line. And in this film, we really see how people's brains cannot comprehend that there might be a better way, that having universal healthcare might be the solution to saving lives. There are some pretty shocking moments in this film, even though it is just interviews. We really see the effect that a lack of support and a lack of healthcare can do to people. It's pretty dark, but it definitely leaves an impression, and it's important, and it's of the moment, all things that you need for this category. At number 2, I have The Last Repair Shop. This one is directed by Ben Proudfoot, who previously directed The Queen of Basketball, last year's winning documentary film, as well as A Concerto is a Conversation, which was nominated the year before, and co-directed by Chris Bowers, who is also the co-director of The Last Repair Shop. This film is being released by Searchlight. They are putting a lot behind it and pushing it. Just like Nai Nai and WIPO, it is a less upsetting film, I would say. This is a film about the bond that children can form with instruments, and it's about a group of people who have dedicated their lives to repairing instruments for school boards that don't have the funding to purchase new instruments. They can send them to this repair shop where musicians volunteer their time to take care of school instruments and repair them. It's beautifully shot, and what I think it does best, it really makes the point. It gets that point across so firmly that an instrument is much more than just something that you can play a song with. An instrument can be an expression and an extension of the self. It's well done. It's not one of my favorites, but definitely it's got polish to it that few other films do in this category. And I think we just honestly are in an era where we're going to see Ben Proudfoot get a nomination basically every single year. If he has a film, he gets nominated. And then at number 1, I could have predicted this months ago, The ABCs of Book Banning. If you just told me that title, I would have said, that's winning the category. I don't even need to watch the film. I have seen the film. I don't even need to watch the film. You just hear that title, and it's a flashback to learning to skateboard in a war zone if you're a girl, where the title is just so strong that I think voters will pick it, even if they do not watch it, because, oh, wow, book banning. How topical, how relevant. And the ABCs of book banning, it has a ring to it. It's got it's a nice title. It's a good title. This film is exactly what you expect. It is a series of children talking about a lot of classrooms are being purged of many books of anything with challenging topics. This can be talking about Black history. This can be talking about LGBTQ rights. This can be talking about even the Holocaust. They're being contested by parents, and they're being banned from classrooms. And this film tells the story through the children being affected by this. So it gets into the classrooms and it talks to kids. What do you think about these books being banned? And then not only do we have these interviews with the children, but we also get to learn a little bit about some of the books that are being banned. We speak to some of the authors of the books. They talk about their thoughts of their books being banned, and we learn about these books. So I think not only is this a very strong subject matter, but I think the approach to it and the way that it doesn't just give a broad overview, but instead directly looks at, this is a book that's been contested in these states, and here's why it's been contested, and isn't that ridiculous? That very focused approach is what's going to be the greatest strength for the ABCs of book banning, beyond the title. But I think, hands down, this film wins the category. Actually, I would say I feel confident about all the winners of these categories. And to bring us to the final category, live action short film. Hoo boy. I'm just going to say right off the bat, this has my favorite of all of the short films, being The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which I think is a masterpiece from Wes Anderson. This category also has some of the worst short films that I have ever seen in my entire life. Down to my number 15 slot. This is my number 15 in both ways. This is the one that I would predict has the least chance to get nominated, as well as this is my least favorite film in the category. The Shepherd, dear God. Okay, well, first off, let's just give a backdrop to this. This is a Disney Plus short film. It's produced by Alfonso Cuarón. He won the live action short film award last year for La Pupille. This is his next one. I think the reason why The Shepherd is currently ranked number 4 on Gold Derby is simply because of that name recognition of Alfonso Cuarón. This film is ass and shit. Where to begin? So, The Shepherd is a Christmas movie set in the 1950s, and it follows a fighter pilot who has been tasked to fly around, and even though it's Christmas Eve, he still has to do his rounds, and he gets lost in the fog, and then a mysterious plane emerges from the fog and guides him to safety. Ooh, what could it be? Oh, I bet it's not a ghost pilot. Well, surprise, surprise, it was a ghost pilot, which we learn as the shocking twist of the film. Sorry I'm ruining the twist for you. I won't ruin the real twist, though, because, you know, if you want a good laugh, go and watch The Shepherd. It feels like an SNL parody at times with just how ludicrous some of the twists and turns are. It's not artfully made. It's cheesy. It's cloying. It is just really not a good film. If you got this in your top 5, take it out. Take it out of your top 5. Don't manifest this into being. Then at number 14, The One Note Man. The One Note Man is a British short film, and here's another film that feels like a Hallmark movie. That's going to be a big theme through this entire category. The One Note Man follows a guy who is in an orchestra, and he has to play one note on his bassoon, and the film just follows his daily routine as he does the same thing over and over every day and goes to rehearsal and plays the same one note on his bassoon. I love Paddington. but it's like someone watched Paddington and took all the wrong lessons from how to make a wholesome movie from it. It gives me vibes less of an Oscar-nominated short film and more of a video that you would see on your Facebook feed as shared by your great aunt. Maybe that's the argument for it getting nominated. It's really going to do gangbusters with the Facebook crowd. Then at number 13, I have An Avocado Pit. This one is being produced by Elliot Page, and it is one of the first, I believe it's made by a trans filmmaker as well. I think it would be one of the first times that a trans person would get an Oscar nomination for a trans story. It is about a trans sex worker who gets into a car with a man, and the man doesn't want anything with the sex worker, but the sex worker's like, actually, I just need a ride. Can you drive me? And then they drive and they chat and then they dance. It's very refreshing to see a transgender film in the Oscar lineup that doesn't resort to trauma, that doesn't resort to making the trans character a subject of violence. I think last year to Night Ride, the film that was seen as the problematic nominee of the bunch, because that whole film's purpose was, let's watch this trans woman be attacked and violated, which is not good. If the only representation you're seeing of trans people in media is trans people being attacked or violated or hate crimed or insulted, that is not a very good representation. And in Avocado Pit, what it does best, it doesn't go to that. But that said, I just don't know if the film has a hook. I hate to say it, as much as I really appreciate that the film is not doing that sort of cloying trauma porn aspect. But we've seen year in, year out, that's what voters respond to in this category, and that's why I don't think this film will get nominated. You know, the voters, they crave the hate crimes. We as audience members out here know that that's definitely problematic, definitely not needed in films about trans people. But we've seen time in, time out that is what voters respond to. And that's why it's at number 13 and not any higher. At number 12, I have Bienvenidos a Los Angeles, which is a little bit of propaganda, maybe a little bit harsh to say, because this is based on a true story. It tells the story of a Nigerian woman who meets a Mexican woman in the back of a taxi. They're both going to the airport right now. Her son, little boy, is coming from Mexico to join his mother there, but she doesn't have a visa. She is an illegal immigrant at this point, and she is worried that what happens if she gets caught at the airport. So this Nigerian woman offers, I will go in for you. I will get your son. And when she goes into the airport, she finds that immigration services have flagged the young boy and they start to question her. And she's also not a citizen, so she begins to see that potentially her act of kindness could jeopardize her own viability in the United States in the future. Now, the thing that I don't like about this film is that in the end, we see this scary ICE agent. She recognizes, oh, you've done this incredible act of kindness for this family. I'm gonna let it slide. And that feels incredibly disingenuous towards the experience of many immigrants in the United States. It's not true that ICE will be forgiving with you if you are a good Samaritan. Maybe the intentions are good, but I think the effect is very troubling. But who knows? Maybe, they always have problematic films in there, so maybe this problematic film will make it in. I just think that I don't see the compelling argument for it, to be honest. At number 11, I have Yellow. Yellow is a film, it's about a woman in a shop trying to pick out a new hijab. Like Our Uniform that I was talking about earlier, it's a story about women who are ripped away of individual expression. It's a tricky thing to talk about in film and to talk about in general, because I do think that some people conflate that hijab and this type of wear is always oppression, which is not the case, because a lot of the time, it is someone's choice to wear it. What does become oppression is when it is not someone's choice to wear. The entire line here is that it is all about choice. And Yellow is really about this. It's about a woman who likes to express herself through her clothing. And as the film progresses, and as she talks about her favorite colors, and as she talks about her fashion sense, and as she shows off her painted nails, we gradually see her individuality kind of ripped away from her. She doesn't want to conform, and yet she is forced to because she has no choice. It is definitely a subject matter that is pressing, is relevant, but to be honest, I don't know if the film is that compelling. It's well made, but it's not really doing anything that feels like it warrants an Oscar nomination, if you know what I mean. Now at number 10, I have Dead Cat. This is a Quebecois film, which is about a young girl who her cat dies and her parents don't know how to tell her that the cat's dead. So what do? Well, they lie to her. Even though they've been told by their therapist, don't lie to your daughter. You need to be able to tell her about death. You need to build these skills and coping mechanisms. Instead, they taxidermize the cat, and she keeps playing with the cat, but she knows that the cat's dead. She just thinks that her parents can't cope with it. It's a film about how grief and the way that a child experiences grief, a lot of the time it can be just as hard on parents as well. When your job is to protect and shield your child from the world, how do you introduce these ideas to them that they will be hurt in the world, that bad things will happen, that things that they love will die and go away? Is that potentially even harder for a parent to deal with the fact that they can't protect their child from the world? It's sweet, it's funny. Now, that said, it is a little bit more of a low-key film. It doesn't feel like an Oscar nominee at all. At number 9, I have the film Invisible Border. This is one that definitely is pressing and relevant, and also probably a little bit problematic. It includes depictions of suicide. It includes more propaganda about immigration police. It's about a refugee family who is visited by the police, and while being worried about being deported, the refugee decides to jump off a building. Her daughter didn't realize that her mother just passed away, and now you have these immigration police trying to decide what to do, how to communicate to this child that her mother just killed herself. I could see an argument for people saying, oh, it's an important, impactful film. I just think that there are other films that are maybe a little bit more pressing above it. I will also say, formally, not a huge fan of this. The editing style is very disjointed. There's constant title cards telling you the time. Like, it'll be like 5 minutes have passed and it'll go 7:35 and it'll be 7:40. Really not a fan of that. At number 8, I have Strange Way of Life. Strange Way of Life is the Pedro Almodovar film starring Ethan Hawke and Pedro Pascal. This one is being widely predicted simply because big movie stars, big movie director. But the thing with Strange Way of Life is that it feels like a student film. I say this as someone who has been a film student who has made plenty of bad student films. This reminds me of one particularly bad film that I made in school where essentially you have two characters yelling at each other the entire movie. You don't know about their past. There's no escalation. You got two characters screaming at the top of their lungs at each other. And I think a lot of student filmmakers have this very bad instinct in filmmaking where, you want to make a dramatic story, but you don't understand that those scenes in movies only work because they're not in a vacuum, because there's a build-up to it. And in a short film, you don't have that. If you present the marriage story screaming scene out of context, it's awful. If you present it in context, it's like, wow, this is an incredible scene, incredible acting, because you know how this has built up. You know how these characters have gotten there. And Strange Way of Life doesn't have that. It's just two characters talking about the past and saying things like, oh, you remember that time when we did this thing? It breaks so many rules that I would expect Pedro Almodovar to know better. It's telling, not showing. It rarely shows what it's talking about. It just tells you, oh, you remember that memory that we have. I think if it does get nominated, it's exclusively based on the star power of Pedro Pascal and Ethan Hawke. And number 7, I hate to say it, I have the Anne Frank gift shop. This is in the top 5 on Gold Derby, and it is awful. The Anne Frank gift shop feels like a bad Saturday Night Live sketch. And what I mean by that is it's 17 minutes long. It has one joke. A marketing team meets with the owners of the Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam, and they come together to think of ways that they can connect with the youth and activate a viral marketing trend to draw more people to the Anne Frank house. Even beyond this film just being a bad SNL parody style film, it's just so whiny. The only joke in it over and over and over is, them complaining about how Gen Z doesn't care anymore. Gen Z is so tuned out, they're just on their TikTok and their Instagram, and they don't care about the Holocaust. It's just such a Gen Z bad message, which I think is really exhausting, and maybe it'll connect with voters. Maybe voters are going to fall for it, but I think the biggest nail in the coffin against this film is that it's just not fucking funny. They bill it as an extremely dark comedy. The poster, it says a really dark comedy on there. There is no dark humor in this movie. I don't think they understand what dark humor is. It stars one of the actors from Abbott Elementary, and to be honest, after watching this film, I don't know if I'm gonna want to watch more Abbott Elementary. I'm just like, it was so painfully unfunny, but so similarly styled that now I'm just like, ugh. If this does get nominated, chalk it up to voters hating Gen Z, and also chalk it up to the title. When we first heard about the shortlists, the film that I picked as potentially a winning film was this film because the title is catchy. It catches your attention. What is that? But that said, if you go and watch it, you're not going to vote for it because it's bad. At number 6, I have The After. This is a Netflix short film starring David Oyelowo. He is, of course, the actor who played Martin Luther King in Selma, and this is genuinely an incredible performance. The After follows this man. He is a father. He's hanging out with his daughter and his wife on a rooftop, and then bam, suddenly a masked assailant pops up with a knife, stabs his daughter, and his wife jumps off the building after watching the child be murdered. So we start the film off with a very tough to watch tragedy, and the rest of the film, David Oyelowo is driving people around in his Uber. He doesn't talk to them, he just listens to their conversations, and then he connects with this one family in particular because he sees his daughter represented in their daughter, and it brings him to a breaking point of grief. His performance is really good. The film is really unsubstantial. Like I said, it is a shockingly graphic murder scene at the very beginning, and then it's about 15 minutes of silently driving around as he is sad and depressed. I don't really see a strong argument for this as a nomination. If it does get a nomination, chalk it up to Netflix being very good campaigners and David Oyelowo giving such a good performance that people forget that the film has nothing to say. At number 5, I have Red, White, and Blue. This is currently ranked number 6 on Gold Derby. It's about a waitress who is trying to get time off to cross state lines and get an abortion. It's very topical. Again, I keep talking about you want those topical short films, those films that say something that's relevant and current to the now, and this one definitely does, especially with what that sort of twist is that happens later on in the film. It really speaks to the current world that we're in, and specifically the United States. It is definitely not an easy film to watch, and potentially, maybe a little bit simplified on this issue, but it's definitely one that I think will resonate with a lot of voters, and for that reason, it is my number 5 slot. At number 4, I have Invincible. This is another Quebecois film, and I would say that this is this year's problematic film, as Invincible tells the story of a young boy who lives in a juvenile detention center, and he is so sick of his life in this place that he escapes, and the film follows him on his last 4 hours before he kills himself. Year in, year out, we see dead kid movies get in. I think there was one year where 3 of the 5 nominated short films were about children dying horrifically. Fauve, Detention, I think was one of them, and I can't remember the last one. If you want to get a film nominated, you just kill a fucking child, and that's it. That's all you have to do to get your movie nominated at the Oscars. And Invincible would absolutely follow in that trend. At number 3, I have Good Boy. This stars Ben Whishaw, and it's a charming little grief comedy drama about a man who attempts to rob a bank with his mother, but he can't do it because he's a good boy. He's a sweet, meek, very shy, kind of strange, awkward guy, but he just drives around the city with his mother, and he kind of wants to do bad things, but he can't do it. He can't pull it off. It's a sweet movie. It's very clear what it's about, even from the start. It plays something off as a twist, but it's not a twist. You can tell it right from the first moment of the film, but it's a sweet movie. Its heart's in the right place. It is well made. The music is strong, and honestly, if we're going with one film that gets in here based on the strength of the cast, it would be this one with Ben Whishaw, not The After with David Oyelowo, not Strange Way of Life with Ethan Hawke and Pedro Pascal. I think Good Boy would be the one that makes it because it's just genuinely a better film than either of those two. At number 2, I have Night of Fortune. It really shocks me. This is close to the bottom of the list, actually. When looking at the Gold Derby odds, it's currently ranked number 12 on there with 75-1 odds. The whole argument I have for Night of Fortune, if Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar wasn't here, I would actually say this would win. It's a well-produced movie, it's well put together, and it has a really nice mix of comedy and drama. It's a story about a man in a funeral home. He is there to say goodbye to his wife, and he has been left alone in the room with her closed casket, and the undertaker has told him, "Take your time, just say goodbye and let us know when you're ready for us." But he can't bring himself to open up the lid. It's a comedy about expectations and about grief and about love and acceptance and moving on. It's very charming, funny, light, while also emotional. If you look back at previous winners, this would fit right in with many of the winners of the past decade. But of course, we don't have to think about that winning unless they snub Wes Anderson, which is possible, because number 1, we have The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. I think this is just going to be Wes Anderson's Oscar. But that said, we do have to consider the short film category has a history of gatekeeping. The short film category is seen as a platform for emerging filmmakers to show their stuff. And it's often seen that the people that pick these films, if they see a director is in here that they recognize, that they really know, they will often just completely overlook the film altogether. I think these voters know what it's like to be an emerging filmmaker, and they don't want every year to just be packed with big filmmakers trying to win an Oscar by making a short film. So it is very gatekeepy, very, very gatekeepy. But look, Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is here. It is by far the best film out of this short list. It's a unique, distinct vision from Wes Anderson that feels distinctly like him, while also trying something new. He's never done something exactly like this one. This, accompanied by the other Wes Anderson short films, would be some of my favorite films of this year, actually. So I'm strongly rooting for The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar all the way to the end. I wouldn't be shocked to see it miss, because there's a history of this category doing that to major filmmakers. So here's what I'm going to say. If The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar makes the nominations, it is an automatic, easy win. But making the nominations is the big hurdle for the film. It's very likely that it could be snubbed. And that brings us to the end of this very, very long video, hopefully informative as well. I hope that you learned something about these short film categories. I spent all the time watching the films so that you don't have to, although definitely I would recommend checking out some of them. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you're predicting in the comments down below. And as always, my name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.